Hey, Kelly, how you doing? Thank you so much for including your work here and for kicking things off with your example of your first iteration of the front of the poster. So that's not always the easiest thing to do. So thank you very much for taking the plunge, so to speak. So um, I was reading your description here. I think everything makes sense as far as your conceptual approach. So let's go ahead and jump right over to the work, which I have open right here. Okay, now there's a few things I want to mention about this. One of the first things is I totally agree with Gloriana. I'm sorry, with Gloriana's comments here, where she's saying that the white is reflective and it seems more like a neon type effect, and I agree with that. So she's saying that X-rays kind of have that blue kind of, and I went over and I just did a quick image search and just X-rays, and this is what she's referring to. It's kind of this kind of blue cast that we see on X-rays. And I think that might be a little bit more visually compelling as well as a little more effective. So think about that in your rendering of the actual X-ray itself. I also want to make a couple of comments regarding the typography. So, you know, we talked about some of the lists of the do's and don'ts in typography. And one of the things that comes up at the top of every list is not to alter or distort any given typeface presentation, meaning that whenever you place type anywhere, if you want to resize that type, absolutely constrain the original proportions or the original aspect ratio. So you don't want to distort wide or you don't want to stretch it vertically without constraining the horizontal proportions. Likewise, you don't want to stretch it horizontally without constraining the vertical proportion. So you will avoid any sort of distortions. Now, the reason I say that is because there's a couple of areas here that looks like the type has been distorted. Discovery of X-rays for sure. That for sure has been distorted. This looks like it possibly has too, and the X as well looks like it's been distorted. So what you want to do is just make sure that you're not distorting or stretching anything without constraining the original aspect ratio. That is just of critical importance in graphic design, whether it be resizing type or images. It's really, really one of the top five, I would say, no-nos in all of graphic design and all of typography is not to stretch your type or to distort the type in any way, shape, or form, and also not, unless, of course, it's specifically relevant. And in that case, I wouldn't even do it. Even if it was close conceptual ties, it's just not a good practice. Okay, now understand, I'm not saying this is, I'm saying that this type has been distorted. It certainly looks like it has, so check that. Okay, next thing I want to do is just talk about the composition itself. So right now with this configuration, you're really got a couple of issues. And number one is that it's just placed basically dead center. So you're not really activating any negative space here. Also, when you take a look at your spatial relationships, the word ray and this discovery of X-rays is really, really undersized in the composition. And just to illustrate that, I'm just going to reduce the size of this window and so I can fit it in here. And then I'm going to decrease the size of this. And I've done this before. And what the reason I do this is because I do this a lot in my own practice just to get an idea of what a piece looks like from a distance. This being a poster, you know that it is meant to be seen at a distance. Typically in poster design, you want to design some sort of aspect that draws the viewer closer to the poster, and then you can give that information. Now, this X definitely does that. It acts as a kind of a magnet for someone to look and say, what is that? And bring themselves a little closer to the poster to find out the pertinent information. What I'm seeing here, though, is that the word ray starts looking just like a vertical line. I'm sorry, a horizontal line. And then this is just completely not even legible. So I think that the relationship of the name, the subhead, and the ray from X-ray are a little bit, could be reevaluated in terms of their relationship with the actual X itself. Okay, so let's just go ahead and bring that back up to size. And then I want to talk about a couple of things here. Let me get rid of that guy right there. Now, let me show you an example. Now I'm going to show you this example, and I don't mean to make comparisons here. But I just want to show you an example of a previous student that used the same laureate and came up with some really interesting results. And this is the example. Now, I want just to draw your attention to the conceptual development of this particular piece. Now, if you look at this and you say, well, wait a second, that's using too many typefaces. And it is. You're exactly right if you thought that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 typefaces in one poster? Wait a second, check that. Make it 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Although that looks 6 or 7 different typefaces in the same poster. Of course, through our training, we would say, wait, that's like, if it's 6, it's like 4 too many, right? But just to give you an idea of what the concept here is this designer looked at the year the X-ray was invented, and I believe it was like late 1890s or I believe it was like right around the late 1890s. Now, that period of time historically in graphic design, poster design was developed with a method called broadside. And broadside posters were all of advertising in that particular era, from the late 1700s to the late 1800s, if not early 1900s. And broadside posters used many, many different typefaces, mostly because the broadside posters were printed very inexpensively, so they used whatever typefaces they could, which typically were the typefaces that the printer had in their type kit, in their type drawer, right? So it was very, very common in broadside poster design to see many, many different typefaces. So that's what this designer decided to kind of mimic the broadside poster technique, along with creating this kind of X-ray look and these other really interesting visual elements. Now, I want you to take a look at this, and this is the part where I have to give a little bit of a disclaimer. I don't mean for this comparison to be discouraging. I'm just trying to make a point, okay? So once again, I do not mean to sound discouraging here, but let's take a look at these two posters right next to each other, okay? The fronts of the posters. All right, so we've got this one, and we've got this one. Now, I really want you to say to yourself, look at this and be honest and say, okay, whoops, didn't mean to do that. Sorry. Okay, which one is more visually engaging? And I think that your example of your poster could be more visually engaging. So let's get rid of this for now. And let's go ahead. Okay, let's close current tab. Okay, so, and let's go ahead and figure out why my computer's acting so strangely right now. Okay, so we want to make this a little more visually compelling, right? And I think one of the things is the fact that, as I said, this axis plays pretty much dead center, which means you're not activating negative space much. So, and then of course the spatial relationships I talked about. But how can we make this more visually intriguing? And I've got an idea. And like I said, I do not want to direct your project. I'm just going to throw this out there and see if it maybe might spark some ideas for you. But instead of creating the X just with a typeface, maybe build that X out of bones, and then add that X-ray effect, the glow, and that kind of really super muted blue kind of color and kind of glow. That might be interesting. That way you could take the bones and turn it around on the back and use the bones to assemble your timeline. That'll do a few different things. That'll create this visual correspondence that we're in search of here. It will also add a little bit of like interesting visual engagement to the piece, right? And it will also develop a really great way to use this visual continuation from the front to the back, being that you take the bones that you use to assemble the X and X-ray and use those to build the timeline. So I'm thinking about that might be kind of interesting. And then, you would have to reassemble your type too. And always pay attention to negative space. Center alignment is rarely, if ever, effective in things other than very formal pieces like a wedding invitation, let's say. So think about activating negative space. Okay, the other thing I want to mention is I want to show you some kind of cool examples, some things that you might even consider in your visual research. So let's jump over here. And I just did this for giggles and grins. I just did this Google image search, and I just used X-ray typography, and I came up with some interesting results here. I think this is really interesting. I think the type itself is super cheesy, but I like the grid background, and I like these kind of color flares. That's interesting. I also think this typography here is somewhat interesting in its presentation, though again, it is center aligned. It's a center aligned composition, so I would probably try to activate the negative space more effectively in this piece. But just want to give you some ideas, right? There's another one. Okay, this one, like, you just want to be careful because this can get cheesy really quick. I think this is really super cheesy with the whole spine right there. I'm talking about maybe building an X out of just like finger bones or femurs or something like that. So think about that. And again, you feel free to use my example if you want. If you want to pursue that, I'm more fine with that. But the meaning behind my comments is just to get you to really try to expand your creativity and really try to shoot for a super visually engaging piece here, where the viewer will look at it and go, not just go, oh, that's a big X with some that looks like an X-ray, which is kind of cool in and of itself. But we want to just really super wow the viewer. We want the viewer to look at this and go, whoa, that's cool. You know what I'm saying? Instead of going, oh, that's kind of a cool big X with the X-ray, we want the viewer to go, wow, awesome. I can't wait to turn this around and see the back of the poster. Do you see what I'm saying? Okay, and again, my disclaimer is this, I do not want to sound discouraging. I think that's really, really important to me, is that I don't want to sound discouraging. But I'm just really, really trying to get you to really expand your creativity in this piece. So that said, Kelly, those are my comments. And if you have any questions, comments, concerns, or if I can clarify anything, please, of course, let me know immediately, and we'll get on that quickly. But other than that, keep working, keep plugging away. If you wanna keep working and post anything else, please have at it. You know, if you're working, I'm working. Remember way back in week 1, I said that if you guys are working, I'm working. So you want to post 10 different iterations here, I'm going to tell you what, I'm going to give you 10 different critiques. So if the point is if you want to reassemble, reevaluate, recompose, rethink your conceptual development, have at it. I'll be glad to provide additional comments. Okay, great job, Kelly. Thank you very much.